So I'm currently listening to Cliff's High on Substack. If you look his channel up on YouTube, he doesn't have one. Those are borrowed. So you find it on Substack Ether, Pirates of the Materium. And I really like listening to Cliff High, even if I fundamentally disagree with certain things. He's positing the right questions, but then that leaves us to Occam's razor and whether or not you have to, instead of finding the most probable solution, the most probable outcome, and just going with that, well, do you have all of the necessary materium in front of you? No, you don't. The biggest question here, when I hear people talking about all these potentials and possibilities, especially when they're talking about what they refer now to blatantly as space aliens, as opposed to non-human intelligence. And then, it's just amazing how this sort of postulate came into being. And then it seems to be a condensing of an entire subject matter, as to say aliens. But how do you draw at that? Like there is no clear, real evidence of any craft flying in and out of our planet. I mean, that's brought up over and over again. Is there a consciousness? Hell yeah, and I mean that in every bit of a pejorative sense. That it's here to mock us, and it is something that could be seen as extremely evil. But then you have to get into, like, I try not to put too many comments below Cliff's or the pseudo Cliff YT channels, postings. But I just put, because he's talking about qualia as a sort of an absolute identifier, and I put qualia, noumenon or noumena, on into Welt or world, and then Weltanschauung, the world view, right? And it creates this tapestry where he kind of identifies everything under the auspices of qualia, and he's correct in that. But I guess my point here is that if you don't go through every variable, and yes, there is a huge missing chunk, right? And he does. He's talking about a lot of the same stuff. It's weird to watch him because it's like, okay, people who are really watching and tapped in, those who have cursed the world for all its, all its plight, and then also reveled in blessing people marginally to the same heights or near to, and lived with conviction and platitude to say that I am dying on this hill, right? That this hill is an illusion. The undulations, the peaks and troughs, they're all illusions, and that I must exist as really getting into Michael Segru's depictions of Marcus Aurelius as an actual figure who existed, and to say that somebody like that could only exist under the auspices of Stoicism, right, as a main trope, and that to venture beyond this and to start to use your own nomenclature and etymology, which is entirely necessary in building your worldview, right? Is that, do you realize that you're borrowing from other people? Of course you do. Are you stealing away like a thieving monkey, right? Bit file information that you'll regard as your own, because eventually, even though when in cleaning your room, you stuff all your dirty clothes under the bed, and you'll make the room look, you're going to fake it till you make it. You'll make the room look really good when your mom or dad walk in before your allowance, or when the Food and Beverage Commission, right, swing by to make sure that everything is on the up and up, right? So cheating is cheating because you're meeting a certain deadline, which is imposed on you, right? It's something else outside of you saying that you need to be ready to take this test. And you better start studying now, because if you go into the moral implications and even further into the theological underpinning aspects of whether or not this test is valid or real, whether or not the nomenclature and the naming of things holds up, right? And so out of this time definition, this time deadline, we go into this psychosis, this paramnesia, this loss in self, because now we're going into a mental breakdown, right? We can't juggle the self and answer the questions that are being imposed on us from an outside source, a governing system, if you will, that was in fact erected and then directed by other selves that were like birds of a feather flock together, that were in a like-minded string, as to say, you know, when Cliff High talks about the Pharisees, then he goes into the Khazarians, and then he goes into the Talmud and so forth. He's perfectly right at doing so. But somebody posted up a really good when he's like, when you're blaming the Jews, and pretty much he's saying, you know, rightly so, go for it, but aren't you realizing that you're falling into a psyop there as well? That's been my point all along. It's not to pick out a monster. They definitely, indeed, picked out we non-Jews as monsters. If you want to see it as, oh, well, I'm not part of this, sort of, all right, we'll say it, you know, this whole correction of, you know, the Knights of Priory connected with the Knights Templar, and to manifest something as a form of Zionism as the Freemasons, right? And using all the same symbols. But going through this alchemical transformation where you're taking the 6 points and you're breaking it down even more into Euclidean and non-Euclidean form, right? Non-Euclidean spherical mathematics and so forth, and you're looking at geometrical constructs, right? So, and breaking the energetics down even further. So you're looking at a large language model, and even more so, you're looking at a large language model that says, oh, if you don't understand these 50-cent words that we just made up based on these symbols, then you're stupid, you're a villain, you're a slave, and you don't matter, right? And even more so, we are going to pamper and praise our children and teach them that you are their food, if it's to their choosing, that you are their sex slaves, if it's to their like, and that they can return back and have a really good Jewish lawyer represent them. They can be seen by under their dress and finery by a Jewish doctor, right? And so all of these things exist, yes, validated, but you have the sellout. You have the weakest possible variable, the weakest link, the Rothschilds as Exhibit A, right? Who hoard all this money and are afraid because they don't want to do what Aleister Crowley, and no, I'm not hailing Aleister Crowley. We don't know enough about him, number one. On one side, from a Christian perspective, they'd be like, oh, yes, we do. This is a 666 beast, child raping, sex magic practitioner who's admitted that he's evil, and he aligns himself with the devil himself. And then you get over here and you're like, you have to prove that the devil exists, that it's not some Promethean conceptualization. And yes, hell and Satan do exist, but both Hel, Hel, and Satan, Satana, are female figures. And aren't we just merely talking about samsara? Are you going to grow up from here? We're not going to stay stuck in this paradigm. What we're going to look at even further is what is behind the mask, what's behind the veil, right? And so you'll see artwork of Baphomet talking to theologians, in the early Catholic Church, conferring, right? That, and then Baphomet as having another counterpart that works almost like a 69 chiral position of himself, where he actually has a face that can, and a mouth that can talk out of his ass, right? But then you look at that quite literally, and you think there's a language model that exists outside of me that I'm constantly drawn back into. It's grotesque, right? It's copulation between male and female. It takes all of the smell, and like, in other words, when Cliff High talks about grit and gritology, right? He's saying that it's on par, or you could, it's a completely different study, but it's on par with ontology, right? Where you're breaking something down into a sequence and you really can build up from here. And it's saying if you don't put in, if you don't take part in, if you're not a part of, and this is the contention of the Masonic order. This is the same thing that the Jews are stating. This is the same thing. It's trying to tell you that things can be earned through merit. When every roadblock is going to be put in front of you, you're not going to be able to do it. I can tell you that 100%. Because there's not enough time in 10 lifetimes, even if you were born as an indigo child, which would mean that you're imprinted with it, with this Judaism, this cheating code, this conceptualization of geography. How does a 2.5-year-old kid know the names of countries? And if you're talking about just understanding geographical locations and being able to pinpoint them on a globe, why aren't they able to continuously amass this information throughout their whole lifetimes? We find, no, they aren't these super geniuses. They don't go into, building superconductors, and they're not, working for Raytheon and BlackRock. You follow them through their life cycle and they become accountants, right? So why was it important? Because what I displayed on another video prior here over the last couple of days, I think it was even yesterday, is the fact that the reason the information is imprinted on them, and it's specifically based around mathematics, geography, and language, and they will just be keeping up with the rest, right? In fact, most teachers are so democratically inclined and are working with their own shortcomings. When they become a teacher, they would like to have done other things, right? They're oftentimes failed writers, or you never have people that just feel good about being around a bunch of snotty ass kids that are, let's get real, come on, midgets, little people, Wizard of Oz, that if you really understood the Pavlovian, Freudian, Jungian aspects to anything, if you were a worthy teacher that could teach any child anything, you would never be there sitting in front of these amalgamated golems that the parents create and make sure that when they go out into society, they're carrying a torch for their parents, right? So they're representing, not only in this country these days, an entirely different subset, patronage toward, like Machiavellianism, toward patriotic. So a lot of times, like if you look at the Bolsheviks who came here generations ago, they're carrying a different torch than people who are still in Russia or any part of the world, right? So they're a time capsule, just like the Hindus in Bali, right? Through their time capsule of imprinted through imperialistic means and measure. Those are different. You're not going through um, the same process as through exposure to, you could say, the light of pure reason, right? So I'm getting a little bit off track here. And my initial was, I'm trying to go back and think about what incited me while I was watching Cliff High. Just most recently, he's doing a two-parter. If you want to go look at him on Substack, I know I've endorsed people that later I realized this is not somebody that I endorsed. This is not someone. See, this is the thing, and this is the reason for me doing this, is the fact that there's this flitting and flirting around a subject that we do for our fellows because we came into the knowledge, the enlightenment, if you will, by measures that you would never wish upon anybody, right? And even more so, you can never tell if lying stagnant inside of somebody, their true self, isn't something that they've tried to suppress or that has been suppressed within them, to where this homunculus, this person that you see out here in society, this straw man, never would have existed if the full truth was exposed, right? So in these conjectures, in these conversations, in these intellectual ventures that are now heavily revolving around what is blatantly being referred to as aliens, which is, to me, it's taking a jump where you can no longer go into an intellectual conversation that hails back to Aristotelian, again, Euclidean conceptualizations. Now you are becoming heretical, right? Now you're talking about something that comes from without, right? And you're definitely naming it. So you might as well call them angels coming down from heaven. You might as well say God lives in heaven, right? Because you're jumping to such a postulate that you have never seen a UFO come from the sky and being able to look at it and go, oh, it's coming from space. It's traveling here. Now it's coming into the atmosphere, and now it's landing on the ground. You have never seen that happen. Yes, I have seen them too. You can look up and you can see orbs. Many people can interact and conjure these things, interact with them, right? Which says that they are a construct of a mental mind operation that is aware of you, and it wants you to know that. You get what I'm saying? Is we're looking past the phenomenon. And the main phenomenon is, have you noticed that people that would have looked away from even the imprinting and the light of pure reason, i.e. the concept, the idea that I'm going to say it, a non-human intelligence, right? And even that is a postulation because it's working with human intelligence. How do you think that it has a psionic ability to communicate with you if it is non-human? It's human in some capacity. It can communicate with you, right? It took a long time before your dog realized, I got to pick up this bowl with my mouth, slam it down so this biatch will fill it up and I can eat. Or maybe I just ate and I'm demanding, and then, my dog just wants to eat more. No, you fat ass, get out of here. Joke, 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 pejorative statement. I'm a human being and you're just an animal. Animus, goodbye. Right? That's not what's happening here with this non-human intelligence. We are not being reduced. We are being communicated with, and more so, we are not being reduced. We are growing and we are heightened in the status and the state of how many people, and I may be wrong on this, right? But I don't see it happening in mass, right? I know I follow Dr. Campbell that you could look up on YouTube. I think it's John Campbell, UK. He's got a couple million, maybe more subscribers, and he follows the increase rate of death, right? And how this may link back up to, he interviews all sorts of different people. And it's very interesting what he talks about. And he is a practicing doctor, I believe, to this day, like an MD practicing doctor. And he's gone off on a certain byline and started to study this. But to see that we aren't being killed off in mass, right? So if the goal was for our souls to be forever lost and for us to be at the point of no return, wouldn't they just throw us a bunch of pornography and drugs, right, in the way of psychosomatic influence, that we would increasingly become more vile, more despotic, more tyrannical, right? Like, you could say that that's happening, but you're looking at Trump under the rushlight of being fully exposed, like, and people are watching this happen. You're watching the truth come out, not only with them and yourself, but it's not some theological pulpit, right? Not some what's referred to as piety, right, which is heavily misunderstood. Like, to say someone is pietous is an actual compliment. So if you haven't looked into it, if you haven't studied Spinoza or David Hume or Thomas Aquinas, or at least from a surface standpoint understood that piety is a good thing, right? That it shows complete and total reverence, but doesn't create a closed-minded loop, right? It's a conviction. It's a patriotism, right? It's looking at things in an ontological, epistemological method, and showing how the qualia, right, the noumenon, the combination of all this, it's not looking at things as I've begun this, looking through an Occam's razor, um, selfish point of view. But I digress. The whole point that I'm trying to get at here is that you, me, I, and everyone else is having to choose, who is my higher self? Have I been investigating this? And the fact that the world is moving on, like, it's asking you point blank, and everyone else, do you really think that you're going to be able to go through this soul evolution and really get to know thyself and express thyself while you're living in the throngs of capitalism and meritocracy? Do you see how ridiculous this is? That you're keeping yourselves back, and at any moment you could just say, I'm not going to do it anymore, and I am putting my nose to the grindstone, but not even in that sort of self-identifying, reductive way, that I am casting off the falsity in the clothing and saying, not standing naked and prostrate, that's just part of it, going, I live, I'm alive, I am, like, I am, right? So in this context, you look at people like Aleister Crowley, when compared to a lot of the people he studied, these great philosophers, and, throughout time immemorial, and to say that, no, this isn't somebody who just became B66. He was stuck in the process of being a man, right? When you look at somebody like Marcus Aurelius, they couldn't live now. They couldn't exist now. That level of stoicism and that ability to be able to express yourself and to be somebody that is so devout, that doesn't exist now. You can't do it. There are people who try to do that, and the reason for is that Occam's razor no longer works because of the complexity that has been thrown in here. And it's basically saying, this non-human intelligence, in my opinion, is saying that you don't have to even indulge in going about this labyrinth. This labyrinth that you're in, this is a human construct, a human-made illusion. But the only way out is through, like, what the human beings cast on you was the only way out is through sin, and then they stuck you in it, right? What we're trying to give you is complete and total, not liberation, but freedom, to say that you have already reached this state. You were born in this state. All you have to do is remember who you are. You don't have to grab at any more human concepts, because what human is You are as alien as we are, but you have been stuck in a body, and we have transcended to the point where we don't get tricked into getting stuck inside the prison of a human body suit. But to say liberated means that you are liberally inclined to go back into the human made matrix and re-enter it. How dumb can you be? How many lifetimes can you go through to where I'm evolving, I'm transcending, I'm evolving? You're still on Earth. You're still in the prison. You're still in a bodysuit. Whether or not you're well hung or well endowed intellectually or have big huge muscles and you're a great athlete, guess what? You're fucked. The next time through, it's going to teach you another lesson, because entropy has to get shuffled around the Jewish Plato machine, but it's not the Jews that are doing it. See? It's certain types of people, certain races of people are given the torch for certain periods of time, right? And then it's all shuffled around all over again. Like, you're supposed to get so pissed off, and then you're supposed to go to war, and you're supposed to go through this psychical warfare, and then you take over the Jews, and the Jews are, or the Germans, or whoever you want to pick out, or the SS, right? Or the Hyperboreans north of Thrace. It could be anybody, but you're going through the same rhetorical process, right? So to me, the fact that these non-human intelligence, and like I say, I do not like to name it that, because it is very human in the sense that we are, but it's able to even communicate with our spirits, our souls, through this refracting prison in this bio bodysuit, right? It's able to talk to your soul. And it is telling you, look, the fact that you are able to juggle this complexity in the temporal state of this world, in this carnal sin matrix that we don't even want to be in. So we're not going to come down and visit you. But if you want to communicate with us, we're here for you. But we aren't going to come too close, because this fucking place is evil, right? To me, that's what's being said. But I'm not saying that these are angelic hosts. These beings are assisting you in the obvious, as to say, reject it. Reject it. You can transcend any time. In fact, if you all get into this mind where you are open to the transcendence, and so what is happening? What is the end byproduct? Everyone is being leveled up. We are all going up into this tier system. We're trying to carry on our lives in our walk in the details of everyday life, but that doesn't really exist. The construct of time, the construct of space, it's telling us that we are not stuck in the illusion, and all we have to do is come together, and not in unity, not singing Kumbaya. No, you simply come to the realization as I come to the realization, and then you don't head off to work and change face back to the presupposition of a lower self, because don't you understand that now you're going to have to try and, so you think you can be a spiritual warrior on the weekends. It is an all the time, 24 hours a day, transcendent state. Once you've transcended, you can't step back. Do you understand? So it's really going to the depths or the heights, rather, the margin, as to say that I no longer am going to be worried about the simple tasks of having a roof over my head, eating human food, wearing the current trends from Gap or shopping on Amazon. I'm not going to be worrying about this. I'm not going to be worrying about that anymore. It is the mind, and the like I say, the transcendence of mind is going to be the only thing that I work on from here on out.